Hi, my name's Isley, and my family never said I didn't belong. They just made sure I never showed up in the picture. They cropped me out of a poster, erased my name from a military file, turned my sacrifice into someone else's campaign ad, all while smiling at dinner like nothing happened. They told the world my brother was the hero. But what if I was the one who carried the wounded through fire? What do you do when the silence from your family becomes louder than any battlefield? Would you speak up or disappear quietly? I hadn't planned on speaking that night, but silence had its own volume, and mine was growing louder. When I returned to my apartment in Springfield, the air felt heavier than usual, like it knew something I didn't. The leaves had mostly fallen, leaving the sidewalks bare and brittle. Inside, the lamp cast a soft golden hue across the hardwood floor, and the faint scent of laundry still lingered from earlier that morning. The mailbox was mostly junk, catalogs, political flyers, one utility bill. But tucked at the very back, nearly hidden behind an envelope addressed to the neighbor upstairs, was a plain white card, no name, no return address, just blank. I turned it over slowly. Inside was nothing, just a faint fold where a card should have been. I knew what it was, or what it wasn't. A few hours earlier, Leora had texted me. There might have been a card. Mom pulled it, said it wouldn't feel right to bring attention. I hadn't replied. What was there to say? Thanks for the honesty? Tell her I appreciate being edited out of my own father's retirement dinner? I stared at the card again. Not an invitation, just another silence. But I went anyway. It wasn't about being acknowledged. It wasn't about repairing something that had cracked long ago. It was about knowing that I could still walk into that house, uninvited, unseen, and know that I belonged somewhere, even if it was only in the corners of their discomfort. The Rig estate hadn't changed since I was 17. Still manicured, still framed in trimmed hedges and brick paths, still cold. The windows glowed warmly, laughter leaking from the kitchen and parlor like something out of a holiday postcard. No one expected me. The door opened before I knocked. One of the servers greeted me politely, clearly unsure who I was. I gave my name. She nodded and moved aside. Inside, the scent of roasted rosemary lamb filled the air, mixed with laughter and the clinking of cutlery. I walked slowly down the hall. Family portraits still lined the corridor, Kellen in uniform, Leora with her graduation sash, my father at Arlington National Cemetery in full dress blues. None of me. I turned the corner into the dining room. Conversations faltered, heads turned. Kellen was the first to recover. He stood and extended a hand like I was a visiting donor. Isley, he said, smiling too wide. Didn't know you were back. I shook his hand. Neither did most people, apparently. Father didn't rise. He sat at the head of the table, eyes on his plate, knife and fork perfectly aligned. He glanced up, nodded once, then returned to his food. No greeting, no warmth, just procedure. I took the empty seat at the far end, not one of the family spots near the center, not where Leora sat glowing beside her fiancé, not next to the mother who didn't even glance my way. I folded my napkin, resting it on my lap like I was a guest in someone else's life. The dinner carried on. Conversation turned to Kellen's upcoming campaign. A senator from Richmond had endorsed him. Vera beamed, telling stories about how even as a child he used to memorize maps of congressional districts. I said nothing. Leora passed around photos on her phone, shots from her recent visit to a military base. They let me in for a tour, she explained, even gave me a jacket for the pictures. I looked up. On the screen, she stood beside an Apache helicopter, wearing a green military jacket. My jacket. My name patch was removed, but the stitching mark was still faintly visible above the left pocket. She'd used my ID. She'd been on my base. For Instagram. I kept chewing. There was no announcement of my return, no mention of service, of deployments, of survival. Just casual talk about wine pairings and campaign strategy. My glass remained empty. The server passed me once. Then again. No one noticed. No one filled it. No one offered. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was just aware. Aware of how easily a family can make room for absence. How they smooth over the missing pieces until they no longer see the space where someone used to sit. When dessert came, I stood. "I have to go," I said softly. Vera finally turned. "So soon?" I nodded. I wasn't really here anyway. No one followed me out. In the foyer, I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the blank card, and looked at it one last time. Not an invitation, just another silence. Lines have a way of becoming boundaries, and boundaries, if ignored, become battlegrounds. The clink of glasses was sharper the longer I sat there, not louder, just clearer, the way a blade catches light when you're no longer blinking. Everyone at the table had something in their glass. Everyone but me. The server passed me again, bottle in hand, then paused at the head of the table. Vera offered a slight tilt of her wrist, and the wine flowed for Leora, for Kellen, even for a cousin I hadn't seen in years. The server moved on without ever looking my way. My glass remained empty. It wasn't a mistake. It was a signal, not one that shouted, but one that hummed in the marrow, a quiet denial of presence. And a declaration that I wasn't meant to be part of the celebration. I sat still. Dad rose from his seat shortly after. The room hushed automatically, like old reflex. "I want to thank you all for being here," he said, voice calm, even. "To celebrate a long chapter of service and to honor the family who carried me through it." He raised his glass. "To Kellen, whose leadership will carry on our name with pride, and to Leora, whose grace steadied this household more than she'll ever know." The table responded with a soft chorus of hears. He sat back down. No one looked at me. I didn't raise my glass because there was nothing to raise. Leora leaned toward me, her voice barely above a whisper. "There was going to be a video about your unit. Mom pulled it." I turned my head slowly. "Why?" She said it might confuse people, that the focus was on Dad, not you. "Not me," I echoed, voice flat. "Got it." My fingers found the napkin in my lap and twisted it slowly. The fabric strained under the pressure, the tribute, the one thing that might have said I mattered once, removed like I was a paragraph in the wrong draft of their story. That wasn't the first time. I took a sip from my water glass instead, letting the cold numbness settle into the back of my throat. Across the table, someone laughed, a cousin, I think. Then a guest, a retired general I didn't recognize, started sharing a story. "There was this one woman," he said mid-toast, "pulled 8 wounded men out during a mortar attack. Kandahar, maybe. Never learned her name. But damn if she didn't move like she was born for it." People nodded. Someone whistled softly. A few even clapped. No one looked at me. No one connected the story. I didn't say a word. I didn't need their recognition. I needed their memory to sharpen. It wasn't new. I'd learned the lesson long ago. I was 15 when Mom sent me to boarding school in North Carolina. Said I needed structure, routine. "You don't fit the image here, Isley," she'd said. "It's not a punishment. It's preparation." But it felt like exile. I had stood at the threshold of this very home, duffel bag in hand, while Vera smoothed her pearls and said goodbye like she was seeing off a student ambassador. No hugs, just an air kiss and a warning. And now, 2 decades later, I was back. Same house, same choreography, different uniform, still an outsider. As dessert was cleared, a photographer arrived for what Vera called a memory we'll cherish. They arranged chairs and places quickly. Kellen and Leora were placed in the center, Vera and Dad to their sides. Everyone else flanked around them like petals on a carefully staged bloom. I was told to stand at the edge, just out of frame, but still visible enough to say I'd been included. "Closer," someone said. "Just a step in, Colonel." But I didn't move. Kellen raised his glass one more time. "To family," he said. "The ones who keep this country proud." Applause rose. I didn't clap. I clenched the napkin in my fist so tightly that the threads started to tear. I didn't leave that night. But I did start drawing the lines. Some stories start with a lie. Mine was twisted into someone else's truth. The dining room emptied slowly, leaving behind the scent of overcooked lamb, expensive wine, and unfinished sentences. I stayed behind, my chair still tucked perfectly into the corner of the table. The wine glass in front of me remained untouched, the surface now dull in the chandelier's glow. In the silence, I could hear the soft hum of conversation from the parlor, laughter that excluded me without needing to mention my name. The same way my name hadn't been mentioned during dinner. I replayed the moment again, Dad standing at the head of the table raising his glass. To my son Kellen and my daughter Leora, my pride. Nothing for me, not a pause, not even a hesitant glance. Just a toast to the family as they'd redefined it. I waited for a correction, a cough, a gesture, a guest shifting uncomfortably. Nothing. Only one man, seated across from me, a cousin by marriage, briefly glanced my way when Dad sat down. He didn't say anything, just looked, then looked away. That was the moment something shifted. Not dramatically, quietly, like a dropped needle in a carpeted room. But I felt it. As the others filtered toward the fireplace and brandy glasses, I stood and moved toward the hallway. I needed air, or space. Or maybe just something that didn't echo back all the places my name used to live. That's when I saw it. The poster stood on an easel near the front door, framed and lit just enough to make it pop. Service, strength, legacy. Kellen's campaign tagline, etched in bold serif font. But it wasn't the words that stopped me, it was the photo. A soldier standing in front of a Humvee, sand whipping around them. Arm raised to shield their eyes. It was a photo from my deployment, Kandahar 2016. I knew it because it was mine. Except in this version, the face had been blurred, the dog tags airbrushed away, just enough to make the silhouette anyone, or more specifically, make it him. Even my war had been reassigned. I stepped closer, my reflection barely visible in the glass. I studied the lines of the body, the posture, the angle. The original had hung in my apartment for years until I folded it away after the last promotion fell through. Now it hung here, claimed by someone who'd never worn combat boots for more than a photo shoot. They didn't need to rewrite my story. They just needed to misplace it long enough to pretend it wasn't mine. I turned away, jaw tight, and re-entered the parlor. Kellen stood near the mantel, drink in hand, addressing the room like a politician already halfway into office. "I stand on the shoulders of those who sacrificed," he said smoothly. "Though they may not seek recognition, they deserve it." The screen behind him flickered as a slideshow began. The third frame froze. A woman, me, carrying a wounded man on her back, ducking under fire. I knew the weight in that photo, the heat, the scream of chopper blades above us. I knew what I looked like seconds before I blacked out from exhaustion. Now it was part of Kellen's montage. No name, no credit, just applause. I didn't move. I didn't smile. The room blurred at the edges, sound dimming as if submerged underwater. When it ended, they toasted. I walked to the porch. The cold slapped my face as the door closed behind me. I didn't need a coat. I needed clarity. I leaned against the railing, eyes fixed on the night sky, dark and sharp like a blade that hadn't dulled with time, and I remembered. That mission. 2 men lost, 3 saved, 8 in total. I carried 2 out by myself. I wasn't supposed to. Orders were to wait. But I didn't. And because I didn't, they lived. I collapsed after the last extraction. That photo, the one now in Kellen's show, was taken right before my knees gave out. Someone had yelled, "She's going down!" And I'd smiled because I knew I had done enough. They used that moment now, not to honor it, but to elevate someone else. They used my pain and called it his pride. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my gallery, found the original photo. There it was. My dog tags in the corner, catching light, time-stamped, geolocked, proof. I tapped it once to enlarge. They may not say my name, but I still have proof I existed. If they wanted to dress erasure as elegance, I was ready to show them what dignity really looked like. It was 10:43 p.m. when I stepped back into my apartment. The air inside felt colder than it should have, as if it too had stayed silent in my absence. I dropped my keys on the counter and stood there for a moment, just breathing. The uniform still clung to me, stiff from the long day, the weight of everything that had gone unsaid pressing down on my shoulders. I unpacked slowly, not because I was tired, but because each motion was deliberate. My duffel bag lay open on the table. I took out my service blouse first, folding it neatly, then the ribbons, each one laid flat. Last came the nameplate, worn but solid, the letters Dorn still etched deep. I didn't hang it up. I didn't put it away. I placed it gently in the center of the table and sat down. Silence had always been my strongest armor. Growing up in the Rig household, you learned quickly that volume didn't equal power, presence did, and absence could be weaponized more efficiently than any insult. But tonight, the silence no longer shielded me. It stung, like a uniform turned inside out. A flash of a memory hit me. During dinner, Vera had leaned toward a guest, her voice low and polished, but her words just sharp enough to cut through china and linen. She wears that uniform like it gives her meaning. As if that were a flaw. I hadn't flinched then. I'd kept my eyes on the roast, counted the seconds it took for my grip on the fork to loosen. Now, seated alone, I whispered aloud, "This isn't costume, it's armor." I stood and walked to the desk in the corner, opened the drawer, pulled out a blank sheet of paper. "If you ever forget why you walked away," I wrote, "read this." The words poured out. Dates, decisions, glances that bruised more than words ever did. No dramatics, just details. The way Dad always introduced Kellen first, even when no one asked. How Vera once removed my photo from the church bulletin because it would complicate the image. The subtle art of being erased while standing in the room. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and scrawled one word across the front. Enough. My phone buzzed. I glanced down, a message from Vera. "I hope you won't show up at the gala. It's meant to be clean, dignified. Let's not reopen what we've managed to close." I stared at it for a long time. There was nothing cruel in her words, nothing blatant, and that's what made them cut deepest. No reply. I didn't owe her one. Instead, I walked to the safe near the hallway closet, entered the code, my old deployment ID, and opened it with a soft click. Inside lay a manila folder. Ridgepoint, the one place they couldn't rewrite. The one space where my name was sealed in reports, commendations, field orders. None of it public, all of it mine. I slid it out, placed it next to the envelope that read "Enough," and stared at both. "I survived combat," I said, voice steady. "I won't lose to cocktails and bloodlines." I didn't sleep that night. I strategized. They built a career on my silence. Let's see what happens when I start speaking. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived, a few scattered conversations floating above the hiss of the espresso machine. I chose a table by the window where the sun filtered through golden leaves clinging to bare branches. Autumn hadn't let go yet, neither had I. I set my phone on the table and opened the group email from Kellen's campaign. Subject line, "Honoring service, defining legacy." I already knew what I would find. The header image spanned the width of the screen. Kellen, hand over heart, flanked by an American flag and a subtle overlay of desert camouflage in the background. It was meant to look like a salute to military values, to sacrifice. It was my photo, not a photo of me smiling in uniform, not a posed moment. It was that photo, the one from Kandahar, where I carried a wounded man across rubble, knees buckling, jaw clenched, eyes locked forward. The one taken seconds before I collapsed. Only this time the angle was cropped tighter, my face obscured by shadow. The dog tags edited out. The light manipulated to make it look less like a person and more like a symbol. The caption read, "He embodies the spirit of sacrifice." No credit, no reference, no name. I whispered into my coffee cup, "They don't need to rename you if they can just erase me." By mid-afternoon, I needed air, or motion, or distraction. I stopped by the pharmacy to pick up toothpaste, maybe something sweet to cut through the bitterness that had settled since the email. The flyer was taped to the window near the entrance, printed in glossy color. Strength, legacy, Kellen Vance for Virginia. The same photo again, more heavily edited, my silhouette, my pain, used to reinforce a slogan that had nothing to do with the truth. The photo had been protected. It was taken by a military media photographer, and I had seen the original stamp myself. Confidential, burned into the metadata. Someone had accessed it, and someone had used it. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. Tessa Keene. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since she left her position at DoD after pushing too hard on a classified FOIA case. But if anyone still had access or a moral compass, it would be her. She answered on the second ring. I saw it, she said, before I could speak. You sure it's mine? Positive, she said. I have the full version. You're in frame, dog tags and all. It's yours, is. We agreed to meet the next day. That night I printed both photos, one labeled fact, the other fiction. I stared at them side by side. One was raw and grainy, real. The other was polished, drained of identity, just enough to be useful without consequence. I remembered the day Kellen had asked me years ago if he could use one of my service photos for a slideshow at a local charity gala. He'd framed it as a tribute. Just something simple, a nod to the family legacy, he said. I had signed the waiver, not thinking much of it. It had been for one event, one night, now it was everywhere. He'd taken my permission and turned it into a license to rewrite the truth. He hadn't just omitted me. He had refitted my sacrifice to serve his image. I thought I was helping family, I said aloud to no one. I was writing myself out. The room felt too quiet after that. I drafted the cease and desist notice carefully, attaching the original file. It was concise, professional, unshakable. I didn't send it, not yet. Instead, I placed both photos and the letter into a manila envelope and wrote one word across the front: watch. Sometimes survival isn't about making it through war. It's about making it through family. The rain hit my windows in steady rhythm, tapping like it was trying to break through. Outside, the streetlights flickered, casting fractured shadows across my living room floor. I sat at my desk, the envelope labeled watch still unopened, resting next to my laptop like a quiet dare. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I turned toward the safe tucked behind the bookshelf. The code hadn't changed in years. My old deployment ID. The familiar click unlocked the door. Inside, buried beneath duty rosters and a folded flag, was a metal folder I hadn't opened since the day I packed it. The label, faded but still legible, read, Ridgepoint, restricted. I brought it to the desk, laid it flat, and let the past unseal itself. Inside was a sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, thick and crisp. Across the front, in bold red print, do not forward. My name was typed in clean military script. Lut, Cole, Isley Dorn. Dated July 19th, 2016. I sat very still. I knew that date. It was the week after I returned from the Kandahar mission. The week I'd reported for reassignment and was told that some things had changed. No one had explained further. I had assumed it was politics, bureaucracy, maybe fallout from my non-standard field decisions. But this was personal. I scanned the barcode on the bottom corner, ran it through the DoD Access Archive. It showed the package was signed for, received at the Rigg residence 3 days after it left headquarters, by Colton Rigg, my father. He hadn't just intercepted it. He'd stolen a turning point from my life and buried it in a safe I wasn't supposed to open again. My phone buzzed. Tessa. I snapped a photo of the envelope and sent it. Seconds later, she replied, "That barcode was rerouted. I ran it once before. Your father signed it in. It never reached your service file. Never went official." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He hadn't just doubted me. He'd erased me. I sifted through the rest of the folder, memos, briefings. One folded sheet caught my eye. It was a command recommendation review. My name at the top. At the bottom, scribbled in blue pen, barely visible, command not recommended. Subject displays excessive independence and field deviation, not aligned with traditional chain of command expectations. The words hit harder than any blast I'd faced in the field. The phrasing wasn't standard, it was his. My father had submitted language I recognized. He used the same wording in junior officer evals during his time in leadership. I'd seen him dictate those phrases into performance reviews, cold and precise. He didn't just block me, he rewrote me. I sat back in my chair, heart thudding. I remembered Kandahar, that extraction. The decision to move early, to disregard the order to hold position. We were outnumbered, low on ammo, and if I'd waited, 3 men would have died, so I didn't wait. I ordered the team to move and we got out, 2 wounded but alive. 1 later lost a leg, but he was breathing when we reached the evac site. That night, I filed the action report myself. Honest, clear. I expected consequences, but I also expected the system to weigh the result, not the deviation. Instead, I got silence. No reprimand, no commendation, just reassignment, lateral, and now I knew why. I didn't disobey, I whispered. I adapted, and they punished me for surviving. I looked around my apartment. The space was clean, minimal, no framed degrees, no shadow boxes or medals on the walls, because I had never needed those things to know who I was, until they'd tried to erase me. I stood and began laying the documents across the floor. Orders, memos, photos, the envelope, and the suppression note. I printed timestamp logs, circled delivery dates, matched Tessa's forensic data with my own access history. A web began to form, thin red thread looping from one pin to another, each connection sharpening the shape of what had been hidden. At the center, I placed the envelope, "Do not forward." I sat back, knees aching, eyes heavy, and I said it aloud for the first time without apology. They didn't break me on the battlefield. They tried at the dinner table. When they start playing defense, that's when you push harder. The cafe was loud in that soft Washington, D.C. way. Coffee orders murmured like secrets. Metal chairs scraped gently against the floor. Conversations about policy floated like perfume above the foam of half-drunk cappuccinos. I chose this place for its noise, for the fact that truth felt safer when hidden among sound. Leora arrived 10 minutes late, cheeks pink from the wind, her coat half-buttoned. She saw me, hesitated, then walked over with the weight of someone who wasn't sure if this counted as betrayal or loyalty. "Hey," she said, setting down her purse, already fidgeting with the napkin dispenser. "Thanks for making time." I nodded. "You said you had something." She paused, eyes flicking to the window, then back to me. "Mom said," she asked, "that you keep things quiet at the gala, that it should be dignified." I tilted my head. Dignified? She said it's meant to be a clean moment, about Dad, not family drama. I sipped my tea. "So I'm the drama." Leora winced. "That's not what I meant." I believed her, but I also knew whose voice she was echoing. That afternoon, back at my apartment, I received a message from Vera herself. The tone was calm, cordial, but each word was sharpened with surgical precision. "You've already made your point. Let's not ruin a night meant for peace." I stared at the text, then took a screenshot and saved it to a folder titled Threats Cloaked. It wasn't a threat in the traditional sense, it was an offering disguised as guilt. A disapproval she didn't say aloud, but ensured I heard anyway. The next day, we had a family planning call on Zoom for the gala. I should have known better. Kellen was already logged in when I joined, seated in his home office with the flag pin angled just right and his campaign slogan visible behind him. "Glad you could make it," he said, with the tone of someone hosting a board meeting. We went through the usual logistics, arrival times, seating charts, which reporters would be attending. Then, just as we were about to end the call, Kellen said, "Just a quick note, Isley." I sat still. "I know you've got things to say, I get it. But going public, it won't land the way you think it will." "Meaning?" "You'll look bitter. Not strong, like you're clinging to old wounds. There it was, the veil pulled back. You're saying if I speak, I look jealous. He smiled tightly. I'm saying perception matters. I didn't reply. I recorded the call. I always did now. Because they don't threaten you unless they're worried. That night, I began sorting everything: emails, documents, photos, recordings. I created 3 folders on a private encrypted server: media narrative, all published campaign content using my image-suppressed files; the intercepted envelope, scanned and timestamped family messaging; every text, call, and note implying I stay silent. I called a military legal consultant, an old contact from deployment. She agreed to help verify the data trail, timestamp integrity, metadata logs. I wasn't planning to make a scene. I was preparing a record. The next morning, I received a voice message from Leora. I'm sorry, I don't agree with them, but I can't stop them. I just thought you should know. I listened to it twice, then deleted it. If silence was their weapon, mine would be undeniable clarity. Later that evening, just before shutting my laptop, a secure message pinged from a military address. General Arden Black will be attending the gala, unannounced. I sat back, heart steady. Then I whispered, let's make it unforgettable. Some applause is just noise, but silence, that can be a weapon too. The Union League Club smelled like polished wood and expectation. Every surface gleamed. Every chandelier sparkled with curated dignity. Outside, the streets of D.C. pulsed with early evening traffic. But inside, time moved slowly, like it was waiting for someone to interrupt the script. I walked in alone, full dress uniform, immaculate. My medals caught the light without apology. My heels echoed across the marble floor, a sharper rhythm than the string quartet tucked in the far corner. Heads turned, conversations dipped a beat, then resumed as if nothing had shifted. But it had. No one greeted me, not at first. Then Kellen saw me. His expression cracked for just a second, eyes narrowing, jaw shifting, before the practiced politician's smile snapped back into place. He nodded once, casually, as if we were acquaintances running into each other at a fundraiser. Vera didn't look at me. She turned toward the governor's wife and whispered something with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't stop. I moved through the room like I belonged there, because I did. General Arden Black was seated near the back, posture straight, expression unreadable. His eyes met mine. He nodded. I returned it. Halfway through the reception, as the brass ensemble shifted to a patriotic medley, a voice called out from the edge of the microphone stand, "Colonel Dorn, it's an honor to have you here tonight." The room froze. It was General Black. He hadn't raised his voice, but the microphone caught it, amplified it. A single clap sounded from somewhere near the stage, polite, hesitant. Then nothing. Kellen's hand tightened around his champagne flute. I nodded once to the general, then took a seat near the perimeter. No one joined me. That was fine. I didn't come for company. I came for the truth. Dinner passed in a blur of speeches and overcooked salmon. I said little, ate even less. Then the lights dimmed slightly and a young cadet stepped up to the podium. "We now honor a story of quiet valor," he began, voice steady, rehearsed. "A soldier whose actions saved 8 lives during an unauthorized evacuation under fire, a decision that defied orders, a decision that saved lives." The screen behind him lit up, the Kandahar photo, the original, uncropped. My name and rank appeared in the corner, Lut. Cole. Isley Dorn. Gasps rippled across the room. I didn't blink. The cadet read the summary. I hadn't submitted it. I hadn't written it. But someone had. The photo of me, sweat-soaked, blood-spattered, carrying Corporal Reyes on my back, held on screen longer than necessary, long enough for them all to see what they'd tried to edit away. General Black didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence said everything. When the applause came, I stayed seated. I didn't smile. I didn't search for anyone's eyes. Let them stew in the silence they once forced on me. I raised my glass, water, not wine, and drank to myself, not to victory, to validation. As the gala wound down, I moved toward the exit, ready to disappear before anyone found courage in regret. That's when I felt it. Someone brushing past, slipping something into my hand without a word. A folded sheet of paper. I unfolded it beneath the soft hallway light. At the top, authorization to suppress promotion, signed by Colton Rigg. My father. I closed my fist around it. The truth had a file number, and now I had it in my hand. The truth wasn't heavy. The lie it had to fight through, that's what weighed me down. Morning came with thin streaks of sunlight stretching across the kitchen floor, filtered through the blinds like silent reminders that the world still turned, even when yours stood still. I sat at the table, the folded sheet of paper in front of me. My coffee went cold beside it. I opened the paper slowly, though I already knew what it would say. The letterhead was official, the stamp bold, confidential. The subject line stopped my breath for half a second. Authorization to suppress field command promotion for Lieutenant Cole, Isley Dorn. I read the email thread once, then again, 7 years ago. The approval chain was clear. The final signature at the bottom, Colton Rigg, my father. The date on the document matched the postmark on the envelope I had discovered in the Ridgepoint file. Do not forward. It was all there. Proof. He hadn't just questioned me, he had authorized the burial of my future. I printed the email, laid it beside the original envelope, and stared at the two papers as if they might somehow explain themselves. But they didn't. The silence did. It took me back to Kandahar. The dust, the heat, the sound of the helicopter blades before they disappeared completely. I remembered coming home after that mission, thinking maybe, just maybe, someone would say, "Well done." Maybe they'd recognize the cost. Instead, I was told my orders had changed. No explanation, just a reassignment and a wall of silence that said more than words ever could. He didn't just stop believing in me. He erased the proof I ever existed in his system. I needed air. Instead, I drove. Lyora's apartment was only 10 minutes away, but it felt farther. I didn't call ahead. I didn't plan to stay. She wasn't home. I stepped up to the door anyway. Something made me glance at the small whiteboard clipped to her fridge, visible through the kitchen window. A yellow post-it note, torn and faded, clung to the side. If Isley ever comes back. That's where the sentence ended. No second line, no continuation, just a half-started thought suspended in time. At the bottom, in faint blue ink, Mom. I stood there, just breathing. I didn't take the note, I took a photo. That afternoon, I returned to the house I used to call home. The lawn was trimmed. The flag on the porch hung motionless. Inside, I could see Vera through the living room window, arranging flowers on the mantel like it was any other day. She saw me. She didn't wave, didn't nod. She simply stood still. I didn't knock. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, showing her the photo of the note on Leora's fridge. I held it up, steady. She looked at it. Then she looked away. I waited. 1 beat, 2, no movement, no signal. There was nothing left to say to someone who never finished the sentence. I turned and walked away. That evening I sat at my desk, lights dimmed, only the glow of the monitor filling the room. I uploaded everything, the suppression documents, the signed letter, the photo of the post-it note, the metadata trail, the training reports, the deployment orders, the photo, my photo, before it was ever used as campaign propaganda. I set the timer, 72 hours. I wasn't sending it to the military. I wasn't sending it to the press. I was sending it to everyone. And I didn't plan to speak. The truth could speak for itself now. I didn't demand recognition. I demanded the lie to stop. The glow of the screen was the only light in my apartment that night. Everything else, the lamps, the streetlights outside, even the moon, felt like background noise compared to the countdown ticking on the server. File release scheduled for 6 o'clock a.m. Monday, 48/12/36. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. There was no thrill, no fear, no what if. Just clarity. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I just wanted to end the illusion. At 11:12 p.m., I got the email. No sender. Just a subject line. Something you were meant to see. The link opened a private server with a single video file titled Operation Ridgepoint, Quiet Valor, pulled. I pressed play. The video was simple, raw, no music, no dramatics, just grainy footage from the field, my unit, Kandahar, dust choking the lens, screams muffled by distance. Then I appeared on screen, dragging Corporal Reyes through the rubble, my boots slipping on blood and sand, my name tag still visible, my hands shaking but never releasing him. The voiceover cracked slightly with emotion. "This," the narrator said, "is what courage looks like." I paused it, not out of pain, not out of pride, just to breathe. I remembered every step of that day, every order I ignored, every man I refused to leave behind. They had erased it. Until now. At 2:14 a.m., my server auto-triggered the release early. Someone had accessed it and the system defaulted to safeguard mode. By sunrise, the headlines were everywhere. Colonel Dorn erased? Family politics in the chain of command. From combat to cover-up, a military daughter's silence breaks. Later that day, a journalist I respected, someone who actually did her homework, emailed with a subject line that made me pause. "You didn't ask for this, but we should have seen you sooner." Attached was an op-ed from a retired general I barely remembered meeting. He'd been at the gala. "I was silent when I saw her," the op-ed read. "That was cowardice. She deserves a record, not our discomfort." Veterans forums lit up. People who served with me shared their memories, their field logs, their photos, unofficial documentation of what had been hidden away too long. One of them posted a grainy shot of me mid-briefing in the desert. "She saved us. Don't let them forget her again." I turned off my phone. At 3:23 p.m. I got a call from a national news anchor. I didn't answer. They emailed, "Would you be willing to speak on what this means for women in uniform?" I replied with one sentence, "The documents speak. I already did." I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I was done. That evening, I went for a jog. My route took me past a local high school, not one I'd attended, just one in the neighborhood. I noticed the crowd outside, balloons, a ribbon, teachers, cameras, a dedication ceremony. I slowed. A small brick wall had been unveiled. Wall of Honor, Community Veterans. Among the plaques, freshly bolted, was a new one. Luata Call, Isley Dorn, U.S. Army. I hadn't asked, but someone noticed. I stood there for a moment, not long. Then I smiled once, nodded, and kept running. The truth didn't set me free. I did. 2 days after the press release, I sat in my car outside the Springfield Community Center. The sun had dipped just enough to stretch long shadows across the pavement, and the windows glowed with the golden warmth of early evening. And I didn't get out right away. Leora emerged from the building, clutching something in her hand. Her steps were unsure, and her eyes searched the lot until they landed on me. She paused, then made her way over slowly, like someone approaching a dog she wasn't sure would bite. I unlocked the passenger door. She climbed in, careful not to make eye contact. Neither of us spoke. I stared at the dashboard while she stared at her hands. She was still holding the envelope, cream-colored, slightly bent at the edges, sealed but worn. She placed it between us like it was fragile. "He wrote it before he died," she said. "Grandpa, I didn't know Mom kept it." I took the envelope, held it in both hands. Inside was a short letter, scrawled in familiar penmanship. "You may not carry our name in pride, but you carried it when we didn't deserve it." That was all. I folded it carefully, returned it to the envelope, and placed it on my lap. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it didn't surprise me. Not anymore. Leora looked down at her shoes. "She wrote to you," she said, "after Kandahar, a few times, but she never sent them." I didn't respond. She said if you came back you'd understand, that she didn't want to say the wrong thing. I turned to her. My voice was low, even. She didn't say anything. That was the wrong thing. Leora flinched slightly but didn't argue. I'm not here for apologies, I added. I know. She reached for the door handle, paused. I just wanted you to know. Someone in this family still sees you. I nodded once. That was enough. Later that evening, I drove alone to Arlington. The cemetery was quiet, as it always is. Orderly rows of sacrifice, silent and clean. I found my father's headstone without searching. No flowers, just the engraved name, Colton Rigg. Colonel, father, husband. I knelt and placed a folder at the base. Inside were 2 documents, the photo comparison, cropped and uncropped, and the email chain authorizing my suppression. On the folder, in bold letters, I had written one word, legacy. I didn't say anything, no monologue, no final words, just silence. Because silence, in the right hands, speaks loud enough. As I turned to leave, a man and a little girl walked past. The girl was skipping. The man, older, wore a faded veteran cap. He paused, looked at me, and without hesitation, raised his hand in a crisp salute. I returned it. That simple gesture filled a space my family never could. I wasn't looking for closure. I was becoming it. I didn't kick the door down. I simply walked through every lie they built to keep me out. The sun was soft that afternoon, gentler than it had been in weeks, as if the sky finally agreed to lower its voice. I stood in a veteran's garden tucked behind the Alexandria Civic Center, surrounded by brass plaques, clipped hedges, and worn benches that had held decades of quiet stories. It wasn't a grand ceremony. There were no spotlights, no orchestras, no headlines, just a quiet dedication event for local officers who had served with distinction. I had received the invitation 2 days prior. No fanfare, just my name, typed clean and certain, Lut, Call, Isley Dorn. I wore the uniform one last time, not for them, for me. A small cluster of retired generals stood nearby, speaking softly. A handful of young cadets from the local ROTC chapter fidgeted nervously beside their instructors. I stood with my hands folded behind my back, breathing in the scent of pine and warm concrete. On a nearby bulletin board, a newspaper article fluttered in the breeze. Rigg family faces scrutiny after military suppression leak. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. The fallout had arrived. Kellen's donors pulled out 3 days after the file release. His campaign issued a non-denial denial that only deepened the questions. His silence, like always, said more than his statements ever could. Vera resigned from the Alexandria Civic Board due to a conflict of moral narrative. The press worded it delicately. I didn't respond to any of it. I didn't give quotes. I didn't go on camera. I simply walked past the podium when my name was called and accepted the plaque with a nod. The applause was polite, genuine, no cameras rolled, no stage needed. After the ceremony, a reporter from the Post approached. "Colonel Dorn," he said, cautious but curious. "Do you think you'll ever speak directly to your family?" I met his eyes, voice steady. "They've had years to listen. I don't speak to locked doors." He blinked, nodded once, walked away without another word. That evening, back home, I opened the folder on my desk marked Legal. I signed 2 letters, one to the Department of Defense requesting an official amendment to my service record, one cease and desist notice addressed to Kellen's campaign manager citing unauthorized image use. I placed both in stamped envelopes. Then I sealed one more, to the Rigg household. Inside, a copy of the newspaper article, and a handwritten note. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stop losing to your silence. No return address, just enough wait to arrive. Afterward, I stood in the center of my living room and unpinned the uniform from its hanger, folded it carefully, laid it in the cedar chest by the window. Not because I was done with who I was, but because I no longer needed it to prove I had been there. The wall above the couch now held 3 frames. The first, the Kandahar photo, uncropped, raw, mine. The second, a note handwritten on an old field brief by my former commander. She led. We followed. The third, a blank canvas. I wasn't done yet. I stepped outside just as the wind picked up, lifting the edge of my coat like a quiet blessing. My phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. "This is General Black. We'd like you to speak at West Point next semester." I smiled, and I walked forward. Some doors don't slam shut. They simply never open. And that's okay. Because sometimes healing isn't about going back. It's about moving forward with the truth in your pocket and your head held high. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Silence may feel safe, but it will never make you whole. You can do everything right, serve, protect, sacrifice, and still be forgotten by the ones who should have stood beside you. But their memory of you does not define your legacy. Your actions do. I didn't speak to get even. I spoke so the next woman wearing this uniform doesn't have to explain why her story was missing from the record. To anyone watching who's ever been the quiet one in the room, the one overlooked, underestimated, or erased, your silence is not your weakness. You get to choose when your voice becomes your power. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like the room was full, but your name was the one never called? What did you do? Did you speak up? Or did you walk away stronger? If this story moved you, leave a comment with 1 to let me know it reached your heart, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't like the video, that's okay too. Drop a comment and tell me why. I'd still love to hear your story. And hey, if you believe stories like these matter, if you want to see more voices that rise from silence, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's more to come, and someone out there needs to hear it next. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone you love. Thanks for listening. See you in the next story.